My name is Jessica Rowland, and I'm 31 years old. I live in Des Moines, Iowa, where the cornfields stretch endlessly beyond the city limits, and the summer heat makes the asphalt shimmer like water. This is where I was born, where I grew up, and where I thought I'd always belong. But sometimes the place that's supposed to feel like home becomes the very place you need to escape from. I should probably start by telling you about my mother, Margaret Rowland. She's 63 now, with silver hair that she keeps perfectly styled in a bob that never moves, even in Iowa's unpredictable wind. She lives in the same 2-story colonial house where I spent my childhood, with its white picket fence and rose bushes that she tends to with military precision. From the outside, everything looks picture perfect, but perfection, I've learned, can be a prison. My daughter Chloe is 9 years old, with strawberry blonde curls that refuse to stay in place no matter how much I brush them. She has my green eyes but her father's stubborn streak, though David hasn't been in the picture for 3 years now. It's just been Chloe and me against the world, trying to build something beautiful from the pieces of our broken little family. That Tuesday in August started like any other day. The morning air was thick with humidity, and I could already tell it was going to be one of those sweltering Iowa days where the heat sits on your skin like a wet blanket. I was getting ready for work at the insurance office downtown when my phone rang. It was Mom. "Jessica, I need you to bring Chloe over after school today," she said without even saying hello. That was typical Margaret. Straight to the point, no pleasantries. "Why? What's going on?" I asked, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder while I searched for my car keys in the chaos of my purse. "I'm having the church ladies over for the prayer circle, and I want Chloe to see what a proper Christian gathering looks like. That child needs more structure in her life." I felt my jaw tighten. This was an old argument between us. Mom had very specific ideas about how Chloe should be raised, and none of them seemed to take into account what Chloe actually wanted or needed. But I'd learned over the years that it was easier to go along with Mom's plans than to fight them. The fights never ended well. "Okay, Mom, I'll drop her off around 4. Make sure she's dressed appropriately. None of those torn jeans or those ridiculous shirts with cartoon characters on them." I wanted to point out that Chloe was 9, not 29, but I bit my tongue. "She'll be dressed fine, Mom." After I hung up, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Not just sleepy tired, but bone-deep weary. When had I started looking so much like my mother? The same worried lines around the eyes, the same way of holding my mouth when I was stressed. It scared me more than I wanted to admit. Work dragged by that day. I sat in my cubicle processing insurance claims, watching the clock creep toward 3:30. My coworker, Linda, stopped by around 2 with a cup of coffee, and that knowing look she got when she could tell something was bothering me. "You look like someone stole your favorite parking spot," she said, perching on the edge of my desk. Linda was 55, divorced, and had raised 3 kids on her own. She'd become something of a mentor to me over the past 2 years. "Just family stuff," I said, not looking up from my computer screen. "Ah, the mother-in-law from hell? She's not my mother-in-law, Linda. She's just my mother. Sometimes that's worse," Linda said gently. "You know, honey, you don't have to do everything she asks. You're a grown woman with your own child to think about." I knew Linda was right, but knowing something and feeling brave enough to act on it are 2 very different things. I'd spent 31 years learning to navigate my mother's moods, to anticipate her criticism, to smooth over the rough edges before they could cut too deep. It was exhausting, but it was also the only way I knew how to love her. I picked Chloe up from school at 3:45. She came bouncing out of Roosevelt Elementary with her backpack hanging off one shoulder and her shoelaces untied, chattering about her day as she climbed into my Honda Civic. "Mom, guess what? Mrs. Peterson said my story about the dragon was the best in the class. She wants to put it on the bulletin board." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, genuinely proud. Chloe had always been creative, always spinning elaborate tales about magical creatures and faraway places. It was one of my favorite things about her, that spark of imagination that hadn't been dimmed by the world yet. "Can we go get ice cream to celebrate?" she asked, those green eyes wide with hope. "Not today, baby. We have to go to Grandma Margaret's house. She's having some ladies over, and she wants you to be there." Chloe's face fell. "Do I have to? Last time I went there, she made me sit still for 2 hours and listen to them talk about boring stuff, and she said my drawings were childish nonsense." My heart ached for her. At 9, Chloe was already learning what I'd spent my whole life learning, that sometimes loving someone means accepting that they might not love you back the way you need them to. I know it's not fun, sweetheart, but it's important to Grandma. We'll just stay for a little while, okay? We drove through the familiar streets of Des Moines, past the coffee shop where I'd had my first job, past the park where I used to take Chloe when she was learning to walk. Everything looked the same as it always had, but something felt different. There was a tension in my chest that I couldn't quite name, like a storm building on the horizon. Mom's house looked exactly as it always did. Perfectly manicured lawn, not a leaf out of place, windows sparkling in the afternoon sun. I could see cars already parked in the driveway. Margaret's prayer circle friends were punctual if nothing else. "Remember what we talked about," I said to Chloe as we walked up the front steps. "Sit quietly. Speak when you're spoken to. And don't touch anything," Chloe finished with a sigh. "I know, Mom." Mom opened the door before we could even knock. She was wearing her best navy blue dress and the pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother. Her smile was bright, but cold, like sunlight on ice. "There's my beautiful granddaughter," she said, but I noticed she didn't hug Chloe. Physical affection had never been Mom's strong suit. "Now, the ladies are in the living room. I want you to go in and introduce yourself properly, Chloe. Stand up straight and speak clearly." Chloe glanced at me, and I gave her an encouraging nod. She straightened her shoulders and walked into the living room like she was walking into a lion's den. I followed behind, greeting the familiar faces of Mom's church friends. There was Mrs. Henderson with her gray curls and ever-present hand fan, Mrs. Walsh, who always smelled like lavender and judgment, and Mrs. Cooper, who had taught Sunday school when I was Chloe's age. They were nice enough women individually, but together they formed something formidable, a collective force of opinions and expectations that could crush a child's spirit without even meaning to. "Chloe, tell the ladies about school," Mom said, settling into her favorite armchair like a queen on her throne. Chloe stood in the center of the room, suddenly looking very small. School is good. I like my teacher, Mrs. Peterson. She says I'm a good writer." "That's nice, dear," Mrs. Henderson said with a patronizing smile. "What do you like to write about?" "Stories mostly. About dragons and princesses and magical forests where animals can talk and—" "Nonsense stories," Mom interrupted sharply. "I keep telling Jessica that child needs to focus on more practical subjects. All this fantasy nonsense is just filling her head with unrealistic expectations." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. "Mom, there's nothing wrong with imagination. Chloe is very talented. Talent won't pay the bills, Jessica. You of all people should know that." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. I knew what Mom was referring to. My failed marriage, my struggles as a single mother, the fact that I was 31 and still living paycheck to paycheck. She had a way of making her point without saying it directly, letting the implications hang in the air like smoke. Chloe shifted from foot to foot, sensing the tension even if she didn't fully understand it. "Can I go color in the kitchen?" she asked quietly. "You may sit quietly and listen," Mom said firmly. "This is a good opportunity for you to learn how proper ladies conduct themselves." For the next hour, I watched my daughter try to sit still on the uncomfortable wooden chair Mom had positioned in the corner. Chloe's legs swung back and forth under the chair, and I could see her fidgeting with the hem of her dress. She was trying so hard to be good, to be the granddaughter Mom wanted her to be. The prayer circle ladies discussed church business, community gossip, and their various ailments with the kind of detailed enthusiasm that only women of a certain age can muster. Chloe looked bored out of her mind, but she was being good. She was being so good. That's when Mrs. Walsh brought up the Henderson boy. "Did you hear about little Tommy Henderson?" she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "His mother found those terrible drawings he'd been making. Violent pictures with monsters and weapons. She's convinced it's because of all those video games and comic books he's been reading. It's the parents' fault," Mrs. Cooper chimed in. "If they don't set proper boundaries, children will just run wild with their imaginations." "Exactly," Mom said, her eyes fixed on Chloe. "Children need structure, not encouragement to live in fantasy worlds." I saw Chloe's face crumple slightly. She understood enough to know they were criticizing her. Criticizing the stories she loved, criticizing the very essence of who she was, and I felt something snap inside me. "Actually," I said, my voice louder than I'd intended, "child psychologists say that creative play and storytelling are crucial for healthy development. Imagination helps children process emotions and—" "Jessica," Mom's voice was sharp as a blade, Now, I don't think we need a lecture on child psychology from someone who clearly can't manage her own child. The room went dead silent. Even Mrs. Henderson stopped fanning herself. I felt like I'd been slapped. Worse, I felt like I'd been slapped in front of my daughter. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You know exactly what it means. Look at her, Jessica. 9 years old and she can't sit still for 5 minutes. She's dressed like a ragamuffin. Her hair is a mess. And she spends all her time scribbling nonsense instead of learning useful skills. And don't even get me started on the fact that her father—" "Don't," I said, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Don't you dare bring David into this." But Mom was just getting started. I could see it in her eyes, that cold fury that I remembered from my childhood, the look that meant someone was about to get torn apart piece by piece. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Jessica. You have no control over your emotions, no discipline, no sense of responsibility, and you're raising that child the same way. Look at her." We all turned to look at Chloe, who was sitting frozen in her chair, tears streaming down her face. She looked terrified and confused and heartbroken all at once. And in that moment, looking at my baby girl being used as ammunition in my mother's war against me, I felt something shift inside my chest. Something that had been building for 31 years finally reached its breaking point. "We're leaving," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" "I said we're leaving." "Come on, Chloe." Chloe practically flew out of her chair and ran to my side. I could feel her trembling as she pressed against my leg. "You are not leaving in the middle of my prayer circle," Mom said, her voice dangerous and low. "You will sit down and apologize for your outburst, and then we will discuss Chloe's behavior like civilized adults." "No," I said, and the word felt strange in my mouth, foreign. I couldn't remember the last time I'd said no to my mother. "We're going home. Jessica Marie Rowland, you will not walk out of this house." But I was already walking toward the door, Chloe's hand in mine. Behind us, I could hear the prayer circle ladies murmuring among themselves, their voices buzzing with shock and excitement. This would give them something to talk about for weeks. "If you leave this house right now," Mom called after us, her voice rising to a pitch I'd never heard before, "don't bother coming back." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. For just a moment, I hesitated. This was my mother, the woman who had raised me, who had done her best even if her best was complicated and painful and never quite enough. Was I really going to walk away from her over this? Then I looked down at Chloe, who was looking up at me with those wide green eyes full of trust and hope and love, and I knew what I had to do. "Goodbye, Mom," I said softly, and we walked out into the thick August air, leaving Margaret Rowland and her perfect house and her perfect prayer circle behind. But as we reached my car, I heard the front door slam open behind us. Mom was standing on her front porch, her face twisted with rage. "Get out of my house!" she screamed, her voice carrying across the quiet neighborhood. "Get out and don't come back! You're a failure as a mother, Jessica! A complete failure! And you're raising a spoiled, undisciplined brat!" I fumbled with my car keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. Chloe was crying now, really crying, the kind of deep, heartbroken sobs that only children can make. "Why is Grandma saying those things?" she whispered. "What did I do wrong?" "Nothing, baby," I managed to say through my own tears. "You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing at all." As we drove away, I could see Mom in my rearview mirror, still standing on her porch, watching us go. And I realized that something fundamental had just changed. Not just between Mom and me, but inside me. For the first time in my life, I had chosen my daughter over my mother's approval. And it felt terrifying and liberating all at the same time. The drive home was quiet except for Chloe's sniffles and the hum of the air conditioning. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, this brave little girl who had just watched her grandmother tear apart everything she thought she knew about family. "Mom," she said finally, her voice small and uncertain. "Yes, sweetheart. Are we never going to see Grandma again?" I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. Our little rental house looked humble and imperfect compared to Mom's pristine colonial, but it was ours. It was safe. It was a place where Chloe could be herself without apology. "I don't know, baby," I said honestly. "I just don't know." That night, after Chloe was finally asleep, I sat on my back porch with a cup of tea and tried to process what had happened. The August night was warm and humid, and I could hear the distant sound of traffic from the highway. Somewhere in the darkness, a dog was barking. My phone had been buzzing all evening. text messages from Mom's church friends, no doubt wanting to check on me or get more details about the drama they'd witnessed. I hadn't read any of them. I wasn't ready to deal with the aftermath yet. What scared me most wasn't Mom's anger or the ugly things she'd said. What scared me was the relief I felt. For 31 years, I'd been carrying the weight of her expectations, her disappointments, her need for control, and for the first time in my life, I'd put that weight down. But what came next? How do you rebuild a relationship with someone who has just shown you exactly what they think of you and your child? How do you protect your daughter from the kind of conditional love that had shaped your entire life? I thought about Chloe's tear-stained face, the way she'd pressed against my leg for protection, the confusion in her voice when she asked what she'd done wrong. She deserved better than this. She deserved a grandmother who celebrated her imagination instead of crushing it, who saw her potential instead of her flaws. And maybe, just maybe, she deserved a mother who was brave enough to fight for her, even when it meant standing up to the most formidable person I'd ever known. As I sat there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the Iowa night, I made a promise to myself and to Chloe. Whatever happened next, I would not let my mother's voice become the voice in my daughter's head. I would not let her criticism and control steal Chloe's light the way it had dimmed mine for so many years. The road ahead was uncertain and probably painful, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking towards something instead of away from it, and that, I thought, was a beginning. The next morning came too soon, and not soon enough. I'd barely slept, replaying the scene at Mom's house over and over in my mind like a broken record. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear her voice. "You're a failure as a mother, Jessica. A complete failure." Chloe had crawled into my bed around 3 a.m, whimpering from a nightmare. She'd never done that before. She was usually such a brave little sleeper. But I guess watching your grandmother have a complete meltdown can shake even the strongest 9-year-old's sense of security. "Mommy," she'd whispered in the dark. In my dream, Grandma was a dragon, and she was breathing fire at our house. I'd held her close, stroking her strawberry curls until she fell back asleep, but her words stuck with me. Sometimes children see things more clearly than adults do. Maybe my mother had been breathing fire at our house for years, and I'd just been too afraid to notice. Wednesday morning felt surreal. I went through the motions of our normal routine, making Chloe's lunch, braiding her hair, driving her to Roosevelt Elementary, but everything felt different now. The world looked the same, but we had changed. We were different people than we'd been yesterday. "Mom," Chloe said as I walked her to the school entrance, "are you going to be okay today?" The question caught me off guard. When had my 9-year-old become the one worrying about me? When had I become so transparent that my daughter could read my anxiety like an open book? "I'm going to be fine, sweetheart. You just focus on having a good day at school, okay?" And Chloe, she turned to look at me, her backpack slung over one shoulder, looking so much older than her years. "You are not a spoiled brat. You are not undisciplined. You are creative and kind and wonderful, and don't let anyone ever tell you different." Her smile was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "I know, Mom. You tell me that every day." And I did. I realized that I'd been counteracting my mother's criticism for years, without even knowing it, building up my daughter's confidence one daily affirmation at a time. Maybe I wasn't such a failure after all. Work was a different story. I couldn't concentrate on insurance claims when my entire family structure had just imploded. Linda stopped by my cubicle around 10 with coffee and that knowing look again. "You look like someone who needs to talk," she said, settling into the chair beside my desk. "Remember what you said yesterday about not having to do everything my mother asks?" "Uh-oh, what happened?" So I told her. The whole ugly story came pouring out. Mom's criticism of Chloe, the prayer circle audience, the explosion that sent us running for the door. Linda listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, making sympathetic noises at all the right moments. "Good for you," she said when I finished. "Good for me, Linda. I just destroyed my relationship with my mother. Chloe doesn't have a grandmother anymore. I'm a terrible daughter and—" "Stop right there," Linda interrupted firmly. "Jessica, honey, you didn't destroy anything. You protected your child. That's what good mothers do. But she's my mom. She raised me. She did her best. Did she?" Linda's voice was gentle but pointed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like she's been tearing you down for 31 years. And now she was starting on Chloe." I stared at my computer screen, watching the cursor blink in the empty insurance form. Linda was right. but accepting that truth felt like betraying everything I'd believed about family and loyalty and love. What if I'm wrong? I whispered. What if I overreacted? What if… Jessica. Linda reached over and turned my chair so I was facing her. Let me ask you something. If someone else, a stranger, a teacher, anyone, had said those things to Chloe, what would you have done? The answer came immediately. I would have torn them apart. Exactly. So why should your mother get a free pass to emotionally abuse your daughter just because she's family? The word abuse hit me like a physical blow. I'd never thought of it that way before. Mom wasn't a monster. She'd never hit me, never neglected my basic needs, but emotional abuse. That was harder to recognize, harder to name. It was criticism disguised as concern, control disguised as love, manipulation so subtle you didn't realize it was happening until you were drowning in it. I need to call in sick tomorrow, I said suddenly. I need time to think. Take Friday too, Linda suggested. Give yourself a long weekend to figure this out. And Jessica, call someone, a counselor, a therapist, someone who can help you work through this. You don't have to do it alone. That afternoon, I picked up Chloe from school and made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. Instead of going straight home, I drove to Waveland Park, where the playground sits under huge oak trees, and the afternoon light filters through the leaves like golden confetti. And are we having an adventure? Chloe asked as we walked toward the swings. Something like that, I said. I thought we could talk. We sat on the swings, pushing ourselves gently back and forth. Around us, other kids were playing, their laughter mixing with the sound of wind in the trees. It was peaceful here, safe, a good place for hard conversations. Chloe, do you remember what happened yesterday at Grandma's house? She nodded solemnly. Grandma got really mad and said mean things about us. She did, and I want you to know that none of those things were true. Not about you, and not about me. I know, Chloe said simply. Grandma says a lot of things that aren't true. Like when she told me my dragon story was stupid. Mrs. Peterson says my stories are the best in the class. My heart broke a little. How long had my daughter been carrying around the weight of her grandmother's criticism? How many times had Margaret's words made her doubt herself? Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. How do you feel when we visit Grandma? Chloe stopped swinging and looked at me with those serious green eyes. Scared, she said quietly. I feel scared that I'm going to do something wrong and make her mad. And I feel sad because she never seems happy to see me. Not really happy, like you are when I come home from school. Do you want to keep visiting her? The question hung in the air between us. I was asking a 9-year-old to make a decision that would affect our entire family, but somehow it felt right. Chloe was the one being hurt by these visits. She deserved a voice in what happened next. I don't know, she said finally. I want to have a grandma. All my friends have grandmas who bake cookies and tell funny stories and play games, but our grandma isn't like that. No, I agreed. She isn't. Maybe she could learn to be different. The hope in Chloe's voice nearly undid me. Even after everything that had happened, she still believed in the possibility of change, still wanted to give Margaret another chance. It was the kind of optimism that only children possess, and I didn't want to be the one to crush it. Maybe she could, I said carefully. But baby, people can only change if they want to change, and sometimes they need help to see that they need to change. We swung in silence for a while, watching the other families at the park. A grandmother was pushing her grandson on the merry-go-round, both of them laughing as it spun faster and faster. Another grandmother was sitting on a bench, reading a story to her granddaughter while they shared a bag of goldfish crackers. This was what I'd wanted for Chloe. This was what I'd kept hoping Margaret would become. A grandmother who delighted in her granddaughter instead of criticizing her, who built her up instead of tearing her down. Mom? Chloe's voice was small. Are you and Grandma going to make up? I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so, but I don't know. What if she says she's sorry? Then we'll talk about it. But Chloe, I need you to understand something. Even if Grandma apologizes, things might still need to be different between us. I might not let her say mean things to you anymore, even if it makes her mad. Chloe considered this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. Like how you don't let anyone at school be mean to me. Exactly like that. Okay, she said, and started swinging again. I think that's fair. That evening, after Chloe was in bed, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I Googled emotional abuse family relationships. The search results were overwhelming and terrifying and painfully familiar. Constant criticism. Check. Conditional love. Check. Guilt and manipulation. Check. Undermining confidence. Check. Using children as weapons. Check. I read article after article, each one describing patterns of behavior that I recognized from my own childhood, my own relationship with mom. The websites talked about toxic parents and narcissistic abuse and generational trauma, terms I'd heard before, but never applied to my own life. One article hit particularly close to home. It was written by a woman about my age who described growing up with a mother who criticized everything: her appearance, her choices, her parenting, her dreams. The woman wrote about years of therapy, about learning to set boundaries, about the guilt and grief that came with protecting herself and her children from someone she loved. The hardest part, the woman had written, was accepting that my mother's love came with conditions, that I would never be good enough, successful enough, perfect enough to earn her unconditional approval, and that my children deserved better. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet darkness of my kitchen, processing what I'd learned. Outside, Des Moines was settling into sleep, porch lights turning off, dogs barking their final warnings of the night, the distant hum of traffic growing quieter. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Mom, but it was Linda. "How are you holding up? Remember, you did the right thing." I typed back, "Thanks." Reading about toxic family relationships, eye-opening and terrifying. Good for you. Knowledge is power. Call me if you need to talk. I set the phone aside and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. As I waited for the water to boil, I thought about patterns. The way hurt people, the way criticism becomes a family language, the way children learn to love conditionally, because that's the only kind of love they've ever known. I thought about my own parenting. Had I inherited any of Mom's patterns? Did I criticize Chloe without realizing it? Did I make her feel like she had to earn my love? No, I was sure of that. From the moment Chloe was born, I'd made a conscious effort to love her exactly as she was. When she was a colicky baby who cried for hours, when she was a toddler who drew on the walls, when she was a preschooler who asked why about everything, I'd loved her through all of it. Not despite her flaws, but including them. Maybe that was the difference. Maybe that was where the cycle could break. The kettle whistled, pulling me back to the present. As I poured the hot water over my tea bag, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would call a therapist. I would start the hard work of understanding my relationship with Mom, of learning how to set boundaries, of healing the wounds that had been festering for 31 years. And I would do it not just for me, but for Chloe, because she deserved a mother who was whole, who was healthy, who could love her without the shadows of generational trauma hanging over them. The tea was warm and soothing, and for the first time since the confrontation at Mom's house, I felt something like peace. It wasn't the peace of resolution. That would take time, maybe years. It was the peace of decision, of knowing that I was finally moving in the right direction. I thought about calling Mom, trying to bridge the gap between us. But what would I say? I wasn't sorry for protecting Chloe, and I wouldn't apologize for standing up to her. Until Mom was ready to acknowledge that her behavior had been wrong, until she was willing to change, any conversation would just be more of the same. So instead, I finished my tea and went to check on Chloe. She was sleeping peacefully, her curls spread across her pillow like spun gold. In sleep, she looked even younger than 9, and I was struck by how much I wanted to protect this innocence, this joy, this bright spirit that was uniquely hers. "And I'm going to do better," I whispered to her sleeping form. "We're going to do better." And for the first time in my life, I believed it was possible. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day researching therapists in Des Moines. By noon, I'd found Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist who specialized in generational trauma and boundary setting. Her next available appointment was the following Tuesday. "I'm calling about my relationship with my mother," I told her receptionist, "and about protecting my daughter from patterns that need to be broken." Dr. Chen works with a lot of families dealing with similar issues, the receptionist said kindly. "She'll be able to help you." After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope I'd carried for so long that Mom would change, that she would suddenly become the mother and grandmother we needed her to be. This was different. This was hope in my own ability to change, to heal, to create something better. That afternoon, Chloe and I baked chocolate chip cookies together. We made a mess of the kitchen. getting flour everywhere and eating way too much cookie dough. Chloe told me about her day at school, about the book she was reading, about her friend Emma's upcoming birthday party. It was normal and messy and perfect, and I realized this was what childhood should look like. This was what I wanted to give her, not the perfect and sterile environment of Margaret's house, but this warm chaos where love lived in the flour on our faces and the laughter in our voices. "Mom," Chloe said as we waited for the first batch to come out of the oven, "I like it when it's just us." "Me too, baby," I said, pulling her into a hug that smelled like vanilla and possibility. "Me too." That night, as I tucked her into bed, Chloe asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you think Grandma misses us?" I thought about it carefully before answering. I think she probably does miss us, in her own way. But missing someone and treating them well are two different things, like how I miss Dad sometimes. Even though he wasn't very nice to us, the comparison took my breath away. At 9 years old, Chloe was already understanding something it had taken me 31 years to learn, that love and healthy relationships don't always go hand in hand. "Exactly like that," I said softly. "Okay," she said, settling into her pillow. "I think I understand." As I turned off her light and closed her door, I marveled at the resilience of children, at their ability to adapt and process and move forward. Chloe was going to be okay. We were going to be okay. And maybe, someday, if Mom was willing to do the work, to acknowledge her patterns and commit to changing them, we could all be okay together. But that wasn't up to me anymore. That was up to her. For now, it was enough to know that I'd chosen correctly. I'd chosen my daughter's well-being over my mother's expectations. I'd chosen health over habit, courage over comfort. It was a beginning, and beginnings, I was learning, were often the scariest and most beautiful things of all. The weekend passed quietly, like the calm after a storm. Chloe and I fell into an easy rhythm. Pancakes on Saturday morning, a trip to the public library where she checked out 3 books about dragons, lazy afternoon reading on the couch while I researched therapists and support groups online. It felt like we were learning how to breathe again. But Monday brought reality crashing back. As I was getting ready for work, my phone rang. The caller ID made my stomach drop. It was Aunt Carol, Mom's younger sister. I almost didn't answer. Carol had always been Margaret's flying monkey, the family member who did her dirty work, who called to check on people when what she really meant was to gather information for Mom. But something made me pick up. "Jessica, honey, I'm so worried about you." Carol's voice was dripping with false concern. "Your mother told me what happened on Tuesday, and I just can't believe you would treat her that way." Here it comes, I thought. The guilt offensive. The family pressure to fall in line. "Hello to you too, Aunt Carol," I said dryly. "Don't be sarcastic with me, young lady. Your mother is heartbroken. Absolutely heartbroken. She's barely eating, barely sleeping. She keeps saying she doesn't understand how you could be so cruel to her after everything she's done for you." I felt the old familiar twist in my stomach, the guilt, the doubt, the voice in my head that whispered maybe I was the problem. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I was a terrible daughter who didn't appreciate everything Mom had sacrificed for me. But then I thought about Chloe's tear-stained face, about the way she'd trembled against my leg, about her nightmare of Grandma breathing fire, and the guilt transformed into something else. Protective fury. "Did Mom tell you what she said to Chloe?" I asked quietly. "Well, I'm sure she was just trying to provide some guidance. You know how your mother is. She has strong opinions about child rearing. She called my 9-year-old daughter a spoiled brat in front of a room full of people. Carol. She told me I was a failure as a mother. She screamed at us to get out of her house." There was a pause. "I'm sure it wasn't that bad, Jessica. You've always been so sensitive, so dramatic about everything. And there it was. The gaslighting, the minimizing, the suggestion that my reality wasn't real, that my feelings weren't valid, that I was the problem. You weren't there," I said firmly. "And I'm not going to justify protecting my child to anyone, including you. Jessica Marie, your mother loves you. She loves Chloe. She's family. Love isn't supposed to hurt, Carol. Love isn't supposed to make you feel small and worthless and afraid. Oh, for heaven's sake, you're being ridiculous. Your mother worked 2 jobs to raise you after your father left. She sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay her. The old script, the old guilt, the same words that had kept me trapped in this cycle for 31 years. But something had shifted in me since Tuesday. I wasn't the same person who had walked into Mom's house last week. I'm hanging up now, I said calmly. If you want to have a real conversation about this, one where you actually listen instead of just defending Mom, you can call me back. Otherwise, please don't contact me again. Jessica, don't you dare. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the power of finally saying no, of refusing to accept someone else's version of my reality. I'd just hung up on my aunt, something the old Jessica would never have done. Work was challenging that day. I kept expecting my phone to ring again, kept bracing for the next wave of family pressure, but it didn't come. Maybe Carol had realized I wasn't going to be guilted into submission. Maybe she'd decided I was a lost cause. During my lunch break, I called Dr. Chen's office to confirm my appointment for the next day. First session with Dr. Chen, the receptionist confirmed. We'll email you some intake forms to fill out beforehand. And Jessica, Dr. Chen wants you to know that taking this step takes courage. That afternoon, Linda stopped by my desk with coffee and her usual perceptive look. You look different today, she observed. Stronger somehow. I hung up on my aunt this morning. She was trying to guilt me into apologizing to my mother. Good for you. How do you feel about it? I considered the question. Scared, guilty, but also free. Like I'm finally learning to trust my own judgment instead of letting other people tell me how I should feel. That's huge, Jessica. That's the kind of growth that changes everything. Linda was right. Something fundamental was shifting in me, and it wasn't just about my relationship with Mom. It was about how I saw myself, how I valued my own thoughts and feelings, how I understood my worth as a person and as a mother. That evening, I sat down with the intake forms from Dr. Chen's office. The questions were harder than I'd expected. Describe your childhood relationship with your parents. What patterns from your family of origin do you want to change? How do you want your relationship with your child to be different from your relationship with your parents? I wrote until my hand cramped, purging 31 years of stored emotions onto those clinical forms. I wrote about walking on eggshells, about never feeling good enough, about the constant criticism disguised as love. I wrote about my fears of passing those patterns on to Chloe, about my determination to break the cycle. Tuesday morning dawned gray and drizzly. Typical Iowa October weather. I dropped Chloe off at school with an extra long hug and drove to Dr. Chen's office with butterflies the size of pterodactyls in my stomach. Dr. Sarah Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an office that felt more like a cozy living room than a clinical space. There were plants everywhere, soft lighting, and a box of tissues strategically placed within easy reach. "Thank you for coming, Jessica," she said, as I settled into a comfortable chair across from her. "I read your intake forms, and I want you to know that what you've been through, what you're still going through, is real and valid. Your feelings are valid." Those simple words nearly undid me. When was the last time someone had told me my feelings were valid without trying to argue with them or minimize them or explain them away? "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. "Let's start with Tuesday. Tell me what happened in your own words." So I did. I told her about the prayer circle, about Mom's criticism of Chloe, about the explosion that sent us running. Dr. Chen listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly just letting me talk. "What was it like for you, growing up with your mother?" she asked when I finished. "Confusing," I said immediately. She could be loving one minute and critical the next. I never knew which version of her I was going to get. I spent most of my childhood trying to figure out how to be good enough, how to make her proud of me. "And did you ever feel like you succeeded? Like you were good enough?" I thought about it. No, there was always something else. Something I could have done better. Some way I disappointed her. Even my achievements were never quite enough. When I graduated valedictorian from high school, she spent the whole dinner talking about how the girl who came in second place had also gotten a full scholarship, implying that I should have tried harder for scholarships too. How did that make you feel? Worthless. Like nothing I did mattered. Like love was something I had to earn, and I was always failing the test. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Children who grow up with conditional love often develop what we call perfectionist trauma. They learn that their worth is tied to their performance, their achievements, their ability to meet impossible standards. Is that what I have? Perfectionist trauma? I think you have a complex relationship with self-worth that was shaped by growing up with a parent who used love as a weapon of control. But Jessica, the fact that you recognized this pattern and stepped in to protect Chloe shows incredible strength and growth. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like I blew up my family. Did you blow up your family? Or did you refuse to participate in a dynamic that was hurting your child? The question hung in the air between us. When she put it that way, the answer seemed obvious. But 31 years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. My aunt called yesterday, I said. She told me Mom is heartbroken, that I'm being cruel and ungrateful. How did that conversation feel for you? Awful. But also, I hung up on her. I've never hung up on a family member before. I've never stood up to any of them before. That took courage. It took desperation. I can't let them do to Chloe what they did to me. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Tell me about Chloe. How is she handling all of this? I felt my chest tighten with worry. She's confused, hurt. She keeps asking if Grandma is going to apologize, if we're going to make up. She wants to have a grandmother, but she's also scared of her. And that breaks my heart because a child should never be scared of someone who's supposed to love them. What do you want for Chloe moving forward? I want her to know she's loved exactly as she is. I want her to feel safe expressing herself, making mistakes, being a kid. I want her to grow up knowing her worth isn't conditional, that she doesn't have to perform for love. Those are beautiful goals, and they're absolutely achievable. We talked for the full hour, and by the time I left Dr. Chen's office, I felt like I'd been wrung out and rebuilt at the same time. She'd given me homework, to start journaling about my feelings, to practice setting small boundaries in other relationships, to research local support groups for adults who'd grown up with emotionally abusive parents. That afternoon, I picked up Chloe from school and made another spontaneous decision. Instead of going home, I drove to Grays Lake Park, where the walking trail winds around the water and the city skyline reflects in the surface like a painting. Another adventure? Chloe asked, perking up in the back seat. Something like that. I thought we could walk and talk. We walked slowly around the lake, watching ducks paddle near the shore and joggers pass us with determined expressions. The October air was crisp, but not cold. Perfect for an afternoon stroll. How was school today? I asked. Good. We're reading a book about a girl who has to live with her mean stepmother, and it made me think about Grandma. My heart clenched. How so? Well, the girl in the story thinks it's her fault that her stepmother is mean to her. She keeps trying to be perfect so the stepmother will love her. But the teacher said that's not how love works. She said real love doesn't have conditions. Out of the mouths of babes. Your teacher sounds very wise. Mom, is that what was happening with Grandma? Was I trying to be perfect so she would love me? I stopped walking and knelt down so we were at eye level. Around us, the park continued its peaceful rhythm. Families feeding ducks, couples walking hand in hand, children playing on the playground. Normal life continuing while we had this extraordinary conversation. Sweetheart, you were trying to be good because you're a good kid. But yes, I think maybe we were both trying so hard to make Grandma happy that we forgot it's not our job to manage other people's emotions. Is that why you stood up to her? To protect me? Yes, and to protect both of us. Because we deserve to be loved without having to earn it. Chloe considered this with her usual 9-year-old seriousness. I'm glad you protected us, she said finally. Even though it was scary. Me too, baby. And I'm going to keep protecting us, okay? I'm learning how to do it better. We continued our walk, talking about school and friends and the book she was reading. As we rounded the far side of the lake, Chloe asked the question I'd been dreading. Mom, do you think Grandma will ever say she's sorry? I thought about Dr. Chen's words, about the patterns that were ingrained in my mother's generation, about the likelihood of real change without acknowledgement and commitment. I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. But even if she does apologize, things would need to be different between us. I would need to know that she understands why what she said was wrong, and that she's committed to treating us better. What if she doesn't understand? Then we'll keep living our lives without her, and we'll be okay. Will you be sad? Probably. You can love someone and still need to protect yourself from them. It's sad, but sometimes it's necessary. Chloe nodded like this made perfect sense to her. Like how I still love Dad, even though he hurt us. The parallel was painful, but accurate. Exactly like that. We finished our walk in comfortable silence, both of us processing the weight of these conversations. As we got back to the car, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing from my life for as long as I could remember. It wasn't the peace of resolution. There were still so many unknowns, so much healing to do, but it was the peace of authentic living, of finally being honest about our reality, instead of pretending everything was fine. That evening, after Chloe was in bed, I started my first journal entry. Dr. Chen had suggested writing as a way to process emotions and track patterns, and I found the words flowing easier than I'd expected. Day 6 after the confrontation, I wrote. Today I hung up on Aunt Carol. Today I told a therapist about my childhood. Today, I told my daughter the truth about love and conditions and protection. I feel like I'm becoming someone new, someone braver, someone more honest, someone who trusts her own instincts. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I wrote about my fears, that I was making a mistake, that I was depriving Chloe of a grandmother, that maybe I really was as ungrateful and dramatic as my family said. But I also wrote about my hopes, that Chloe would grow up feeling secure in my love, that I could break the cycle of conditional affection, that maybe someday our family could heal. As I was finishing my journal entry, my phone buzzed with a text message. My heart stopped when I saw the name, Margaret Rowland. We need to talk, the message read. Nothing else. I stared at the phone for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was it, the moment I'd been both hoping for and dreading. Mom was reaching out. But was she reaching out to apologize or to escalate the conflict? I thought about Dr. Chen's advice about boundaries, about protecting myself and Chloe, about not rushing back into harmful patterns just because someone was family. Finally, I typed back, I'm willing to talk when you're ready to acknowledge that what you said to Chloe was wrong and hurtful. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came quickly. I don't owe anyone an apology. You're the one who needs to apologize for your disrespectful behavior. And there it was, the confirmation that nothing had changed, that Mom still didn't see the problem with her behavior, that she was still more concerned with being right than with relationships. I turned off my phone and finished my journal entry. She's not ready, I wrote. And that's okay. I can't control her journey or her timeline. I can only control mine. And I'm choosing healing over harmony, truth over peacekeeping, Chloe's well-being over family expectations. It was a choice I'd never thought I'd have to make, but having made it, I felt more like myself than I had in years. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be more family pressure, more guilt, more moments of doubt. But for the first time in my life, I was walking that road with my eyes wide open, with professional support, and with an unshakable commitment to protecting the bright, beautiful spirit of my daughter. And that, I realized, was enough. 3 weeks passed without another word from Mom. 3 weeks of therapy sessions with Dr. Chen, of journal entries that grew longer and more honest each day, of watching Chloe blossom without the weight of her grandmother's criticism hanging over her like a storm cloud. October in Iowa was showing off. The leaves on the oak trees had turned brilliant gold and crimson, and the air carried that crisp promise of winter that always made me feel nostalgic. Chloe and I had developed new traditions to fill the space that Mom's presence used to occupy. Saturday morning pancakes had evolved into elaborate breakfast adventures where Chloe got to choose the shape and I got to choose the toppings. We'd discovered a bookstore cafe downtown, where the owner, Mrs. Patterson, let Chloe read to the shop cat while I graded my insurance forms in the corner booth. Life was quieter now, but it was also lighter. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd been spending walking on eggshells until I didn't have to anymore. But the peace couldn't last forever. On a Thursday afternoon in late October, as I was picking up Chloe from school, I saw a familiar figure standing by the playground fence, Margaret Rowland, looking every inch the composed, put-together woman she'd always been, but with something different in her posture, something that looked almost like uncertainty. Chloe saw her too. "Mom," she whispered, pressing closer to my side. "And why is Grandma here?" "I don't know, sweetheart, but it's okay. We're okay." Mom approached us slowly, like someone trying not to spook a wild animal. She was carrying a small wrapped box, and her usual perfect composure seemed slightly cracked around the edges. "Hello, Jessica," she said formally. "Chloe." "Mom." I kept my voice neutral, protective. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to talk to you." "Both of you." She looked down at Chloe, and for just a moment, something soft flickered across her face. "I brought you something, Chloe." Chloe looked up at me uncertainly. I nodded, and she stepped forward to accept the gift. Inside the box was a small leather-bound journal with a golden dragon embossed on the cover. "For your stories," Mom said quietly. "Mrs. Patterson at the bookstore said you like to write about dragons." My heart stopped. "You've been to Mrs. Patterson's?" I wanted to understand, to see what you and Chloe do together. "Mrs. Patterson told me about Chloe reading to Oliver the cat. She said Chloe has a gift for storytelling. This was not the conversation I'd expected to have. This humbled, uncertain version of my mother was so different from the woman who'd screamed at us 3 weeks ago that I hardly knew how to respond. "Thank you, Grandma," Chloe said politely, hugging the journal to her chest. "It's beautiful. Chloe, honey, why don't you go play on the swings for a few minutes while Grandma and I talk?" I suggested. She nodded and ran off toward the playground, but I could see her glancing back at us every few seconds. Smart kid. She knew this conversation was important. "You look good," Mom said once Chloe was out of earshot. Rested. "What do you want, Mom?" She flinched at the directness of my question. The old Jessica would have softened it, would have made small talk first, would have made it easier for her. But the new Jessica, the one who'd been in therapy for 3 weeks, who'd been journaling and reading and learning to trust her own instincts, wasn't interested in making this easy. "I want to apologize," she said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. In 31 years, I could count on one hand the number of times my mother had apologized for anything. And even then, they'd usually been followed by justifications that negated the apology entirely. "For what, specifically?" I asked, Dr. Chen's voice echoing in my head. She'd taught me to ask for specificity, to not accept vague apologies that could be taken back later. Mom's composure cracked a little more. "For what I said to Chloe, for calling her, for saying those things about her. She's just a child. A wonderful, creative, imaginative child, and She stopped, taking a shaky breath. "I was wrong. What else? What else are you apologizing for? Because, Mom, this isn't just about what happened 3 weeks ago. This is about patterns that have been going on for years." She stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "I don't understand." "I'm in therapy now," I said simply. "I'm learning about emotional abuse, about conditional love, about the patterns I grew up with that I don't want to pass on to Chloe." "Emotional abuse?" Mom's voice rose slightly. "Jessica, I never abused you. I never laid a hand on you. There are other ways to hurt someone, Mom. Constant criticism, making love conditional on performance, using guilt and shame as weapons. Those things cause damage too." I watched her process this, watched the defenses go up in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she was going to retreat into anger, going to tell me I was being dramatic and ungrateful just like Aunt Carol had. But then something unexpected happened. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked older than I'd ever seen her. "Your father used to say the same thing," she said quietly. The mention of Dad caught me off guard. Mom rarely talked about him. He'd left when I was 12, and she'd spent the years since then portraying him as weak and unreliable. "He did, before he left. He said I was too hard on you, that I made you afraid to make mistakes. He said I was raising you to be perfect instead of letting you be human." She looked out toward the playground where Chloe was swinging, her hair flying behind her like a copper banner. "I told him he was wrong. I thought I was preparing you for the real world, teaching you to be strong. What changed your mind, Mrs. Patterson?" Mom's smile was rueful. "Do you know what she told me when I went to the bookstore? She said Chloe lights up the whole place when she comes in. She said watching Chloe read to Oliver is like watching pure joy in action. And then she said something that made me think." "What?" She said, "That child is so lucky to have a mother who celebrates her exactly as she is." And I realized, I've never celebrated you, have I? I've never just been proud of you without wanting you to be different somehow. The admission hung between us like a bridge that neither of us was sure we could cross. Around us, other parents were picking up their children, the normal chaos of after-school routines continuing while my world shifted on its axis. "No," I said finally. "You haven't. I don't know how to change," she said, and her voice was so small, so lost, that it broke my heart a little. I don't know how to be different than I am. It starts with acknowledging the problem," I said gently, "and maybe with getting some help. Therapy isn't just for people like me, Mom. It's for anyone who wants to understand themselves better, who wants to build healthier relationships." She looked at me sharply. "You think I need therapy?" Here was the crossroads. I could backtrack, could soften the suggestion, could make it easier for her to avoid the hard work of real change, or I could be honest, even if it was difficult. "I think if you really want to have a relationship with Chloe and me, a healthy relationship, then yes, you probably need professional help to understand the patterns you learned from your own childhood and how they've affected our family. My mother never," she started, then stopped. My mother was much harder on me than I ever was on you. I'm sure she was, and her mother was probably hard on her too. That's how these patterns work. Mom, they get passed down through generations until someone decides to break the cycle. We stood in silence for a moment, watching Chloe on the swings. She'd found another little girl to play with, and they were having an animated conversation about something that was making them both giggle. She really is wonderful, isn't she? Mom said softly. She is, and she deserves grandparents who see that wonder instead of trying to fix it. I want to try, Mom said suddenly. I want to learn how to be better. But Jessica, I need you to be patient with me. I'm 63 years old, and these patterns, they're all I know. Hope bloomed in my chest, cautious but real. I can be patient, but I won't compromise Chloe's well-being. If you're not making real progress, if you fall back into old patterns, I'll protect her, even if it means protecting her from you. I understand, she said, and I thought she actually did. What do I need to do? Find a therapist. Start doing your own work. And Mom, when you're ready, really ready, to have a conversation about our relationship and the ways it needs to change, I'll be here. And Chloe, I looked over at my daughter, who was now hanging upside down from the monkey bars with her new friend, both of them laughing at something only 9-year-olds would find hilarious. Chloe gets to decide how much contact she wants with you as you work on yourself. She's been hurt too, and she needs to feel safe. But if you do the work, if you really change, then maybe we can rebuild something healthy together. Mom nodded slowly. I'll call someone tomorrow. A therapist. Good. Would it be all right if I hugged her goodbye? The question was so tentative, so unlike the commanding Margaret Rowland I'd known all my life, that it took me a moment to respond. You can ask her if she'd like a hug. Let her choose. Mom walked over to the playground where Chloe was still playing. I watched as she knelt down to Chloe's level, something I'd never seen her do before, and said something that made Chloe's face brighten. Then, to my amazement, Chloe threw her arms around her grandmother's neck in a spontaneous hug. When Mom walked back to me, there were tears in her eyes. She's so forgiving, she said wonderingly. Even after everything, she's still willing to give me another chance. Children are like that, I said. But Mom, don't mistake her forgiveness for permission to hurt her again. She's trusting you to do better. I will, she said firmly. I promise you, Jessica, I will do better. After Mom left, Chloe and I walked slowly to our car. She was clutching her new journal and practically bouncing with excitement. Mom, did you see? Grandma got down on the ground to talk to me, and she asked if I wanted a hug instead of just grabbing me like she usually does. I saw that, sweetheart. How did it feel? Different. Good different. Like maybe she's learning how to be a grandma instead of just trying to be right all the time. Out of the mouths of babes. Again. What do you think about seeing her again sometime? Chloe considered this with her usual seriousness. I think I'd like to try, but slowly. Like, maybe we could meet at the park instead of her house for a while. And maybe she could come to one of my school plays or something normal like that. Those sound like very reasonable ideas. And Mom, I'm glad you protected us. Even if it was scary for a while, I'm glad you didn't let her keep being mean to us. That night, after Chloe was asleep, I called Dr. Chen to tell her about the encounter with Mom. How are you feeling about it? She asked. Cautiously hopeful, I said, but also realistic. Words are easy. Dr. Chen, change is hard. I need to see sustained effort over time before I trust that this is real. That's very healthy, Jessica. What will you be watching for? Follow through. Does she actually find a therapist? Does she do the work? Or does she just want the appearance of doing the work? How does she handle it the first time Chloe does something that triggers her old patterns? Those are all excellent benchmarks. And how do you feel about your own growth through this process? I thought about the woman who had walked into Mom's house 3 weeks ago, so desperate for approval that she was willing to sacrifice her daughter's comfort for it. Then, I thought about the woman who had just set clear boundaries while leaving the door open for genuine reconciliation. I feel like I'm becoming the mother I always wanted to have, I said. Not perfect, but honest. Not controlling, but protective. Not demanding, but loving. That's beautiful, Jessica, and that's exactly what Chloe needs. After I hung up, I started my journal entry for the day, but instead of writing about the conversation with Mom, I found myself writing a letter to Chloe, a letter she might not read for years, but one I needed to write. My dearest Chloe, I wrote. Today your grandmother took the first step toward becoming the person she should have been all along. I don't know if she'll follow through, if she'll do the hard work required to really change, but I want you to know that whatever happens, you are loved completely and unconditionally. Your worth is not tied to your performance or your behavior or your ability to make other people happy. You are valuable simply because you exist, simply because you are you. I also want you to know that standing up for yourself and for the people you love is not cruel or disrespectful. It's necessary. It's healthy. It's what strong people do when they see injustice or harm. Your great-grandmother was probably criticized as a child, and she passed that criticism on to your grandmother, who passed it on to me. But it stops here, with us. You get to grow up knowing that love is not conditional, that mistakes are opportunities to learn, that your imagination and creativity are gifts to be celebrated. I hope someday you'll read this and understand that every difficult choice I made was made out of love for you. Every boundary I set, every time I said no to someone who wanted to hurt us, every therapy session and every hard conversation, all of it was because you deserve better than the patterns that came before us. You are my heart walking around outside my body, and I will protect that heart with everything I have. I signed the letter and tucked it into my own journal. Someday, when Chloe was older, I would give it to her. But for now, it was enough to have written it, to have put my love and my promises into words that couldn't be taken back. Outside my window, Des Moines was settling into another quiet autumn night. Somewhere across town, my mother was hopefully looking up therapists in the phone book. Somewhere in her bedroom, my daughter was sleeping peacefully, protected by boundaries she didn't even know existed. And here, in my kitchen, I was becoming the woman I'd always been meant to be. Not perfect, but whole. Not without flaws, but without apology for protecting what mattered most. It had taken 31 years and a moment of explosive clarity to get here. But as I closed my journal and turned off the kitchen light, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth every difficult step. The cycle was broken. The pattern was changed. And tomorrow was full of possibilities that had never existed before. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new apartment, still in Des Moines, but in a different neighborhood with bigger windows and a backyard where Chloe could plant a garden, making chocolate chip pancakes for Mother's Day brunch. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was celebrating Mother's Day by cooking for my own mother, but this time it felt different. This time it felt like a choice instead of an obligation. Mom had kept her word. She'd found Dr. Patricia Williams, a therapist who specialized in family trauma and generational patterns. For 6 months, she'd been doing the hard work of examining her own childhood, understanding how her mother's criticism had shaped her, learning new ways to express love that didn't involve control or conditions. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, moments when she fell back into old patterns of criticism or manipulation. But the difference now was that she recognized it when it happened. She would catch herself mid-sentence, apologize, and try again. Sometimes she called me after our visits to process what had happened, to talk through the triggers that had made her react the old way. Dr. Williams says I'm learning to rewire my brain. She'd told me a few weeks ago that after 63 years of thinking love means fixing people, I'm finally learning that love means accepting them. Chloe had been cautious at first, which I encouraged. We started with supervised visits at neutral locations: the park, the library, the bookstore where Mrs. Patterson would smile knowingly as 3 generations of Roland women sat in the children's section, reading stories about brave princesses and friendly dragons. Gradually, as Mom proved that she was really changing, Chloe began to relax around her. Last month, she'd even asked if Grandma could come to her school's spring talent show, where Chloe was going to read one of her dragon stories aloud. "She won't say my story is nonsense anymore, will she?" Chloe had asked, still carrying some wariness despite the progress. "If she does, we'll leave," I'd promised. "But baby, I don't think she will. Grandma's learning how to be proud of you instead of trying to change you." And she had been proud. I'd watched Mom's face during Chloe's performance, seen the genuine wonder and delight there as my daughter captivated the audience with her tale of a young dragon who saved her village through kindness instead of fire. When Chloe finished, Mom had been the first one to stand up and applaud, tears streaming down her face. "She gets her storytelling gift from you," Mom had said afterward. "You used to make up the most beautiful stories when you were her age. I was always trying to get you to focus on practical things, but you had such an imagination." It was the first time she'd acknowledged that maybe my childhood dreams had value, that maybe she'd been wrong to discourage them. Small steps, but important ones. Now, as I flipped pancakes and listened to Chloe setting the table in the dining room, I reflected on how much our lives had changed, not just because of Mom's progress, but because of my own continued growth. I was still in therapy with Dr. Chen, still learning to trust my instincts, still practicing the art of loving without enabling, of being kind without being a doormat. Linda had been promoted to regional manager and had become something of a mentor to me, teaching me about assertiveness in the workplace, about asking for what I deserved. I'd gotten a raise and a better position at the insurance company, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt financially secure. But the biggest change was in how I felt about myself. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for 31 years, that voice in my head that criticized every decision, that told me I wasn't good enough, smart enough, strong enough, had finally quieted to a whisper. In its place was something I'd never experienced before: self-compassion. "Mom, Grandma's here," Chloe called from the living room. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of the boundaries we'd established. This was a special occasion, but it was still on our terms. Mom was welcome in our home, but she was a guest here. Our rules, our comfort level, our pace. I opened the door to find Mom standing there with a bouquet of daisies, my favorite flowers, not roses from her perfect garden, and a wrapped package that looked suspiciously book-shaped. "Happy Mother's Day, sweetheart," she said, and kissed my cheek. The endearment was new, something Dr. Williams had encouraged her to try. It still felt a little foreign coming from her lips, but I could tell she was working at it. "Happy Mother's Day to you too, Mom." Chloe bounded into the room and threw her arms around her grandmother. The ease of their interaction now still amazed me. Children are so resilient, so willing to forgive and try again when they feel safe. "Grandma, wait until you see what I made you," Chloe announced, tugging on Mom's hand. "Oh, and it's a story I wrote about a grandmother who learns magic from her granddaughter. I can't wait to read it," Mom said, and I could tell she meant it. "But first, I have something for both of you." She handed me the package, and when I unwrapped it, I found a leather-bound photo album. On the cover, in Mom's careful handwriting, were the words, "Jessica's Story." "I found these in my attic," she explained as I opened it. Pictures I'd forgotten about, or maybe pictures I'd tried to forget because they reminded me of times when I wasn't the mother you needed. The first page took my breath away. There I was at age 5, covered in finger paint and grinning at the camera. My first masterpiece hung proudly on the refrigerator behind me. I remembered that day. I'd painted what I called a rainbow monster, and I'd been so proud of it. But I also remembered Mom's reaction, how she'd sighed and immediately started cleaning the paint off my hands and face, muttering about the mess I'd made. "I should have celebrated your creativity," Mom said softly, looking over my shoulder at the photo. "I should have told you how wonderful your rainbow monster was." I turned the page. There I was at 7, dressed as a fairy for Halloween, my costume homemade and slightly crooked. At 10, reading a book under the big oak tree in our backyard, completely absorbed in whatever story had captured my imagination. At 12, the day before Dad left, standing between my parents and smiling like I believed our family would last forever. "Why did you make this?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "Because Dr. Williams helped me understand something important. She said that healing isn't just about changing how we behave going forward. It's also about making peace with the past. I can't go back and be the mother you needed then, but I can acknowledge the mother you were always meant to have." I felt tears sliding down my cheeks as I continued through the album. Each photo was accompanied by a note in Mom's handwriting, not the criticism I'd come to expect, but affirmations, apologies, expressions of pride and regret. Under a picture of me graduating high school, "I was so proud of you this day, but I was too busy worrying about your future to celebrate your accomplishment. You worked so hard for this moment, and you deserve to feel nothing but joy." Under a photo of me holding newborn Chloe, "The moment I saw you with your baby, I knew you were going to be an amazing mother. I should have told you that, instead of criticizing everything you did. You had all the love Chloe needed. You didn't need my interference." "Mom," I whispered, overwhelmed by the gesture, by the depth of reflection it represented. "There's more," she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small wrapped box and handed it to Chloe. "This is for you, sweetheart, but it's also for your mom." Chloe unwrapped it to reveal a delicate silver necklace with a small dragon pendant. But this wasn't just any dragon. It was clearly inspired by the dragons in Chloe's stories, with kind eyes and a gentle expression. "I had it made special," Mom explained. Because I want you to know that your imagination is a gift, not something to be fixed or changed. And I want you to remember that dragons can be protectors, not just destroyers. Chloe threw her arms around her grandmother, and over her head, Mom looked at me with tears in her eyes. I know I can't undo the damage I did, she said quietly, but I'm hoping I can at least stop adding to it. You already have, Mom. You already have. We spent the morning cooking together, Mom helping Chloe make her special Mother's Day pancakes while I prepared the rest of brunch. It was the first time the three of us had cooked together without tension, without criticism, without the underlying current of disapproval that had always made me feel like I was failing some invisible test. Instead, there was laughter when Chloe got flour in her hair, gentle guidance when she struggled to flip a pancake, and genuine delight when she successfully created a pancake that looked vaguely like a butterfly. Look, Grandma, it has wings. It's beautiful, sweetheart. You're quite the artist. During brunch, Chloe regaled us with stories from school, tales of her friends and her teachers, and the book she was reading about a girl who befriends a lonely dragon. Mom listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions, celebrating Chloe's enthusiasm instead of trying to redirect it toward more practical subjects. Mrs. Peterson says I might want to enter the Young Writers Contest this summer, Chloe announced between bites of pancake. That sounds wonderful, Mom said immediately. Will you let me read your entry when it's finished? Really? You want to read it? I would be honored to read it. After brunch, as Chloe played in the backyard and Mom and I cleaned up the kitchen, we fell into the kind of comfortable conversation I'd never thought possible between us. How are you doing with all of this? I asked as I loaded the dishwasher. The therapy, the changes, all of it. It's harder than I expected, she admitted, drying a glass with careful attention. 63 years of thinking I was a good mother, only to discover that I was passing on the same criticism and control that my mother used on me. It's humbling, and sometimes it's devastating. But you're doing the work. That's what matters. Dr. Williams says that recognizing the problem is only the first step. The real work is in changing the neural pathways, learning new responses to old triggers. She says it's like learning to speak a new language, the language of unconditional love. I smiled at that. How's your fluency coming along? I'm still very much a beginner, Mom said with a rueful laugh, but I'm practicing every day. And Chloe is a very patient teacher. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the kind of peaceful quiet that had been impossible when every interaction was fraught with unspoken criticism and defensive responses. Jessica, Mom said finally, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Okay, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Really forgive me, not just tolerate me for Chloe's sake? I stopped what I was doing and really looked at her. This woman who had shaped my childhood, who had been both my greatest critic and my most persistent presence. She looked older now, more fragile somehow, but also more real. The perfect facade had cracked, and what was underneath was human and flawed and trying to be better. I'm already forgiving you, I said honestly. Not all at once, not for everything, but piece by piece. Each time you catch yourself before saying something critical, each time you choose to celebrate Chloe instead of correct her, each time you acknowledge the harm you caused instead of defending it, forgiveness happens a little bit more. What about trust? Do you think you'll ever trust me again? I'm learning to trust the version of you that you're becoming. The version that goes to therapy and does the work and admits when she's wrong. But Mom, trust has to be earned over time. And that's okay. That's how healthy relationships work. She nodded slowly. Dr. Williams says the same thing. She says I need to be patient with the process. That rebuilding relationships is like building a house. You have to do it one brick at a time, and you can't skip steps. Smart woman, Dr. Williams. She's helping me understand that love isn't about molding people into what you think they should be. It's about celebrating who they already are. Through the kitchen window, we could see Chloe in the backyard, digging in the small garden plot we'd planted together. She was talking to herself as she worked, probably creating another story about the magical vegetables she was convinced would grow there. She's extraordinary, Mom said, watching her granddaughter with wonder. And she's extraordinary because you let her be herself. You gave her something I never gave you, the freedom to be imperfect and still be loved. I learned from your mistakes, I said gently. That's what each generation is supposed to do. Learn from the one before and do a little bit better. And I learned from yours, Mom said surprisingly. Watching you protect her that day, watching you choose her well-being over keeping the peace, It showed me what real motherly love looks like, fierce and protective, and willing to face conflict for the sake of your child. We finished cleaning up and joined Chloe in the backyard. The three of us sat on the porch steps, watching butterflies dance among the flowers we'd planted along the fence. It was a perfect spring afternoon in Iowa, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of lilacs from the neighbor's yard. "This is nice," Chloe said contentedly, leaning against my shoulder. "I like when we're all together like this." "Me too, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair. "Me three," Mom added, and there was wonder in her voice, like she was surprised to discover that peace was possible, that love could exist without conflict or control. As the afternoon wore on, we talked about Chloe's summer plans, about the garden she wanted to expand, about the story she was writing. Mom shared memories from her own childhood, good memories this time. Stories about her grandmother who had encouraged her love of books, who had seen potential in the shy little girl Margaret had been. "I think I forgot those parts," Mom said thoughtfully. "I focused so much on the criticism and the control that I forgot there were people in my childhood who loved me unconditionally. Maybe that's part of the healing, remembering the good along with the bad." "Dr. Chen says the same thing," I said, "that we all carry both wounding and healing from our past, and part of growing up is learning to choose which legacy we want to pass on." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Mom prepared to leave. At the door, she hugged Chloe first, a real hug, warm and genuine, not the stiff, obligatory embraces of the past. "Thank you for letting me be part of your Mother's Day," she said to both of us. "Thank you for becoming the grandmother I always hoped you could be," Chloe replied, with 9-year-old honesty. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying, sweetheart. Every day, I'm trying. I know, Grandma, and you're getting really good at it." After Mom left, Chloe and I sat on the couch together, looking through the photo album she'd given me. Chloe was fascinated by the pictures of me as a child, by the stories Mom had written beside each one. Mom," she said as we reached the last page, "do you think Grandma's going to keep getting better at being a grandma?" "I think so, baby. She's working really hard at it, and she's learned a lot about herself. But even if she doesn't keep getting better, we're going to be okay. We know how to take care of ourselves now." "I'm proud of you," Chloe said suddenly. "Proud of me. For what? For protecting us. For teaching me that love isn't supposed to hurt. For showing me that it's okay to stand up for yourself even when it's scary." My heart swelled with pride and love and gratitude for this wise, compassionate little person who had taught me as much about love as I'd taught her. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart, for being forgiving without being naive, for giving Grandma another chance while still knowing your own worth." That night, after Chloe was asleep, I sat in my kitchen with my journal and tried to capture the fullness of the day, the complexity of emotions that came with genuine healing and reconciliation. "Today felt like a gift," I wrote, not just because it was Mother's Day, but because it was a day when love felt uncomplicated, when relationships felt safe, when 3 generations of women sat together without anyone needing to be anyone other than who they are. 6 months ago, I thought I had to choose between protecting Chloe and having a relationship with Mom. I thought love meant accepting harmful behavior, that family meant tolerating dysfunction. But I've learned that real love sometimes means saying no, setting boundaries, demanding better. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the person you set boundaries with does the work to meet you on the other side. I don't know what the future holds for our family. Healing isn't linear, and there will probably be setbacks and challenges ahead. But for the first time in my life, I feel hopeful about all of it. Not the desperate hope that tries to control outcomes, but the peaceful hope that trusts in the process, that believes in the possibility of growth and change and second chances. Chloe is growing up in a different kind of family than the one I grew up in. She's learning that love is patient and kind and unconditional. She's learning that her voice matters, that her feelings are valid, that she doesn't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, she'll pass those lessons on to her own children someday. The cycle is broken, the pattern is healed, and tomorrow is full of possibilities that didn't exist before we found the courage to choose love over fear, truth over harmony, healing over tradition. I closed the journal and looked around my kitchen, this bright, welcoming space that Chloe and I had made our own. On the refrigerator were her latest drawings, stories about brave dragons and kind princesses and magical gardens where everything grew exactly as it was meant to. On the counter was the dragon necklace Mom had given her, waiting to be worn to school tomorrow with pride. This was what healing looked like, I realized. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of authentic love, not perfection, but progress, not the erasure of the past, but the redemption of it. And as I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. It had been painful and scary and necessary, and it had led us to this. A family learning to love each other not despite their flaws, but including them. It had led us home. It had led